I think you were saying to me at the start of the year that Lando Norris was the odds-on favourite to win the championship. Well, what have these guys got to say now? Deep inside, you've got to have that burning feeling of, you've got to be John McEnroe complaining about this, complaining about that. You've got to be Nigel Mansell moaning about Alan Prost having a better car at Ferrari or whatever. And you've got to be a human being who believes 100% that it's your given right to be world champion. That's why I keep saying Lando needs to forget about Oscar Piastri, forget about the engineers, forget about telemetry, forget about social media, and just drive the car on gut feel and get on with it. And Nigel's only methodology would have been, I'm the fastest guy out there, I'm going to pass this guy and I'm out of there. And you just get the feeling that some weekends Lando just doesn't have that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour with my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 minds to have ever goated, the legend, the man, the myth, the one that they call Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm a bit knackered actually, Cameron. Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, three hard days of work. Yeah, right. What a life I have. No, I'm fine. I'm great. Sun's shining. Just taking Dexter for a walk and a bit of golf this afternoon. So what more could you ask for?
What more could you ask for indeed, sir? Well, a bit of F1 chat potentially. Let me ask you, as is customary, Mr. Windsor, the biggest story to come out of the Bahrain Grand Prix was what?
Well, it's now 2-1 Oscar Piastri versus Lando Norris in terms of wins, isn't it? And that's a huge thing for the young Englishman that's everybody's been touting as the next world champion. As you know, I don't understand betting. I have no respect for any of these so-called pundits that put up the odds. But I think you were saying to me at the start of the year that Lando Norris was the odds-on favourite to win the championship. Well, what have these guys got to say now? As a matter of interest, do they all come out on Sunday night and apologise to everybody for being wrong and not having any idea about Formula One? Does that happen or not? It's a rhetorical question anyway. Yeah, I mean, as predicted, Lando's biggest problem always was going to be Oscar Piastri, and I never changed my tune on that, and I stand by it today. Lando, I mean, the thing about Lando, I was thinking about him out this morning when we were going for a walk, was that he does have weekends when he's just perfect from beginning to end, isn't he? And he gets it absolutely right. And there's no way Oscar can live with him unless Oscar does something really special. And then he has these other weekends. And, I remember when he was driving for Carlin in, was it F2 or GP2? I can't remember what it was back then. But I remember he wasn't going that well. And there was a moment, I think it was in Barcelona, and he just drove into the wrong garage during a pit stop. And I remember talking to the Carlin guys. I said, I don't know what's going on with Lando. It's kind of weird. He's kind of going through some sort of brainstorm. And I wonder whether that's a sort of Lando trademark now. He has these weekends. I mean, I'm always the last in the world always to talk about form. I think it's just a cop-out really to say, he's on good form or bad form. It's usually some technical issue, whether you're a cricketer, footballer, computer scientist, whatever it is, there's always an issue that perhaps make you look as if you're having an off-form day, and you need to work out what that is in a scientific, logical way. And I suspect it's the same with Lando, but a lot of people probably will just write it off. Oh, he was off form in Bahrain. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean he was braking too harshly into one in qualifying with that extra toe and the extra speed that he had? And as a result of that, he then didn't really feel confident for the remaining two sectors because he didn't want to blow the lap completely. And does it mean qualifying sixth, the most he was ever going to do was finish third? And then there's the other psychological side of Lando, which is the engineer saying, trying to G him up and saying, Russell doesn't think he can go the distance on the softs. You're in good shape. You're on the best tires for the restart, blah, blah, blah. And Lando's rejoinder is, oh, no, those soft tires are great. They're mega tires. Wish I was on those sort of thing, which is almost talking himself out of it. I can't imagine in a million years, Nigel Mansell in that situation ever thinking the guy in front had got any advantage over him whatsoever. And Nigel's only methodology would have been, I'm the fastest guy out there. I'm going to pass this guy, and I'm out of there. I'm going to be on the podium, win this race. He would never think any other way. And it wasn't just thinking that way. It was believing that. It was believing that from the heart, and right inside him. And you just get the feeling that some weekends Lando just doesn't have that. Maybe, as I said a couple of conversations ago, maybe he's too intelligent. I don't know. But, certainly George Russell, I thought was absolutely brilliant yesterday. That's the best race I think George has ever driven. And And I just, I was just blown away actually. I think how good he was, and to beat Lando in that car on those tires, just sensational. And I think that also embarrassed Ferrari, didn't it? I mean, why were Ferrari not trying to do something like George? And they weren't that far away. And I don't know. We're talking about the most important thing. We'll get on to Ferrari in a minute, no doubt. But I think, obviously Oscar's domination of Lando from qualifying onwards was just sublime, brilliant. And I put, my thumbnail was, is this the next world champion? I mean, I've seen many world championships evolve over seasons, and this to me smells like an Oscar Piastri world championship now.
Mr. Windsor, let me double click on something you said there. You said that Lando seems like more often than not, he's talking himself out of it. I've listened to a couple of different podcasts and they talk about the psychology of sport. And I'm not a sports psychologist, neither are you, Peter, but I would imagine that level, the extent to which Lando is self-deprecating, post-race saying things like, I feel like I've forgotten how to drive an F1 car. I'd imagine that there is downside ramifications as far as performance and lap time. Can Lando continue in this same vein as far as this self-deprecating nature and being such a Debbie Downer in front of the world's press and media, and think that he has a reasonable hope of winning a world championship in 25?
Well, no, not if he continues that way. No chance whatsoever, because Oscar Piastri is the flip side of that. He's laid back, very calm, doesn't overthink it, doesn't overcomplicate it, just loves driving racing cars. He's always on the edge, always on the limit, and nothing phases him. This is the guy he's got to beat. That's as I keep saying. This is the biggest problem Lando's got. I mean, you say I'm not a sports psychologist. I'm very glad I'm not, because I don't actually believe in sports psychologists at all. I think it's all mumbo jumbo, and it's much more simple than athletes or racing drivers try to make out. And I gave you my game plan for Lando Norris last winter, and it was: forget all social media for a start, forget having a profile, forget being the smooth professional Formula One driver. You're rough, tough Lando Norris, you don't speak to anybody, and you hate Oscar Piastri. I mean, that is obviously going to an exaggeration, but deep inside, you've got to have that burning feeling of, you've got to be John McEnroe complaining about this, complaining about that. You've got to be Nigel Mansell moaning about Alan Prost having a better car at Ferrari or whatever. You've got to be like that, because you've got to be fighting your own battle, and you've got to be a human being who believes 100% that it's your given right to be world champion. You've got to be tough. And I think social media and the whole business of being a Grand Prix star is, it's a bad era for Lando to be racing in. He would have been much more comfortable racing in the 70s or 80s, probably, because all this stuff is confusing him, I think. And I've said that from day one. Get rid of the social media. I'm completely astonished, to be honest, that Zach hasn't made him do that, because Zach's a racer. He's just as happy to be at Snetterton watching his endurance team testing on a Thursday afternoon in the rain as he is to be in the sun in Bahrain. And he knows what racing's all about. And it's pretty logical to me that Lando Norris needs to just get in the ditch, get dirty, and come out fighting. That's how he needs to be. And he was that racing driver when he was much younger. Now he's too polished. He's too polished, and that's the problem with Lando. And the minute there's an issue, it becomes a confused mess of the polished Lando versus the Lando who's just made a mistake, and how to react to it all and what to do. You don't admit, you don't concede to your engineer that you think the guy in front's on better tires when he's on softs. What was that all about? Lando had the prime tire strategy for the Grand Prix. If you look at Pirelli's, proposed best race tires for the race, it was exactly what Lando had: soft, medium, medium. No argument about that. We can get on to what Ferrari did in a minute. But for Lando to start saying on the radio, oh no, George is on better tires, it's just ridiculous. I've never heard anything like that, actually. That was bizarre. I wish he'd got back to his engineer when he was telling him in Hungary not to win, to give the win to Oscar. I wish he'd said, what are you talking about? Sorry, can't hear the radio, turn it off. I wish he'd done that. And if he'd done that, he'd be a better racing driver today. He'd be tougher, harder, meaner, leaner. And I dare say Oscar wouldn't be quite as able to tread all over him as he is. And that's I always said it was the biggest mistake Lando could make was to give that win to Oscar in Hungary last year. A bit like David Coulthard giving the win to Mika Hakkinen in Melbourne '99. Ever since up from that race onwards, Mika always had him.
So don't set a dangerous precedent, Peter.
Yeah, don't. Well, it's not so much a precedent. It's I've got this guy. I can tread all over him whenever I want. It's not. It's not so much a precedent. It's just who's the king of the hill.
Very good point. Speaking of King of the Hill, let's talk to Oscar Piastri very quickly, Peter, because I always, going into 2025, I always felt like Lando would have the whip hand over Oscar at the altar of his qualifying pace. Frederick Vasseur came out this week and said that this is now a qualifying championship, so important is where you put the car on the grid for Sunday. However, I'm concerned for Lando because of a couple of different things. We spoke offline that Lando has... he makes a cheeky error of the unforced variety from time to time. Not dissimilar to Charles, that Lando's always had that in his locker. And on those days, Oscar will always out-qualify him. But now it feels that there's a paradigm shift going on in real time, that Oscar is the one gapping Lando to the tune of a tenth or two per sector. If you look at their performance normalised. What do you make of that, Peter? Are we seeing Oscar Piastri becoming himself, final form, and is that dude capable of beating Lando again over the course of 24 races?
Well, as I've always maintained, I think Oscar still has much more potential than he's showing now, and that is going into short corners on slower and medium speed corners. I think right now Kimi Antonelli is actually better on slow corners than Oscar Piastri, but Oscar's very, very good. But he could be better there. I think that's one area where he can improve. Medium speed or fast corners, he's just fabulous, and James Hunt and when James was at his peak, and I think that it's part of it is Lando making mistakes, and part of it is Oscar not making mistakes and knowing what he does really well and doing it, because he's uncluttered, he's unflustered, and he's relaxed, and he gets out there and he just drives the car. Whereas Lando is making these mistakes, and I don't know, it's really the same answer we had in the previous question, which is that Lando needs to just become a much meaner racing driver and believe in himself 100%, and not really look at what Oscar's doing. That's part of the problem in Formula One. Your biggest opponent is your teammate. That's the guy you got to beat because he's in the same car. And yet teams insist on having all this interplay of information from one side of the garage to the other, studying one another's telemetry. The engineers get together in the debrief. They all exchange their information. And I'm sure at McLaren, there's more information exchanged probably than any other team, because it's a well-run team in the sense that it's a corporate entity and there's no hidden secrets. To me, that doesn't work. That's not motor racing. To me, there should be a barrier between the two. And if one driver wants to pay his mechanics a bit extra, if he gets a few points in the championship, a bonus on the side, go and do it. And if one driver wants to hold back a little bit of information, that's what happens in motor racing. And I suspect, Oscar plays that game better than Lando Norris, for sure. And I'm not saying he keeps anything back, but I would bet that there are moments when Oscar has said something like, oh yeah, I've got a bit of mid-corner understeer there or whatever. And then they go into the session with a setup that in theory is going to give him the mid-corner understeer. And when Lando looks at the telemetry later, he hasn't got any mid-corner understeer. And it'll be that sort of thing. And then Lando will probably get confused because he's the guy that's being the nice guy and giving all the information and giving the win to him in Hungary and all the rest of it. And Oscar's a race driver, he's not stupid. He's a race driver and he's a very clever guy. So that's why I keep saying Lando needs to forget about Oscar Piastri, forget about the engineers, forget about telemetry, forget about social media, and just drive the car on gut feel and get on with it. That's what needs to happen. But it won't. Of course it won't. McLaren will never let that happen in a million years because they've got too many people employed to make sure that doesn't happen in all their committees everywhere.
Very well said, Peter. Just quickly on the paradigm shift that we're seeing happen in real time. Statistically, Lando out-qualified Oscar 20-3, including sprint races last year. Already now, I think Oscar's leading Lando in quali 3-2. A paradigm shift in terms of performance, if ever you've seen one, right?
Yeah. And I think it's because we had a whole winter of Lando Norris being the next world champion. I think that's what happened. And he's come out expecting it to continue as it did without thinking, probably because people around him aren't saying it, your biggest issue is going to be Oscar. You need to think about how you're going to beat Oscar next year. He's probably thinking, oh, yeah, I got him in qualifying. 25, it's my year. I think he said that, didn't he? 25 is my year or something like that.
At the end of
And
Dhabi,
that's a big thing to say with Oscar Piastri in the other car. If Clay Regazzoni was in the other car, or Sergio Perez or Valtteri Bottas, 100%. But, Oscar Piastri in the other car, and you're saying, oh, it's going to be my year. Talk about red rag to a bull. Because Oscar would have seen that for sure. If not, Mark Webber would have seen that. So, that was not a good thing to say. And again, it's a good example of why he shouldn't be doing interviews, shouldn't be doing social media, shouldn't be doing any of that rubbish, and just becoming a hard, fast racing driver. And what we're seeing, I think, is a backlash to the way the winter went for Lando Norris, potential world champion. You should never think that way. Over the winter, it should have been digging deep, back to fundamentals. These are all things that are going to go wrong. These are the things I haven't done very well. I'm going to work on them absolutely flat out. I don't want any commitments, nothing. Flat out, this, I'm going to work on that. Throttle here, brake there, steering, whatever. And I don't know. Maybe that didn't happen. Maybe he did too many social media things. Maybe he's believing the social media because inevitably it permeates the psyche, doesn't it? And that's a problem. It's a problem when you got a guy like Oscar. He's very low profile, relatively low for a racing driver.
Don't you think, though, Mr. Windsor, if I argue devil's advocate for a second, that if you're trying to quell the expectation pressure doom loop that is competing for a championship in 2025, and you are Lando and very sensitive and you want to be light, surely you kind of need some extracurricular activities to almost pour water on those pressure flames and have you be able to focus on the Grand Prix on race weekend? Does it need to go to the Met Gala like Lewis does to make sure he kind of closes the book on the pressure that is F1 every single race weekend? But could that not help Lando?
Well, no, of course. I'm not saying he should be thinking eat, sleep, drink Formula One and work on it 1,000% throughout the winter. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying his extracurricular activities, as you call them, should be karting in the rain at Rye House or, rallying in secret up in the Welsh forests or something that's healthy for a racing driver to do. It shouldn't be anything to do with social media or polish or image or branding or any of that stuff, especially if your number one threat is your teammate. And you've got to think about how within that team, you've got to be the fastest guy. You've got to be quicker than him in every qualifying session, and you've got to outrace him in every Grand Prix. That is your task. And that's presumably what he didn't set himself over the winter. Because why would he have said, this is my year? You wouldn't say that if you were thinking, because you would think Oscar Piastri ain't slow, And I'm not, and I'm clearly Lando Norris. I'm not Max Verstappen. I'm bright enough to know that, but I'm going to be as good as Max. I'm going to work as hard as I can to be as good as Max. But my threat is Oscar Piastri. It's an unusual situation. That's why I keep going on about it, because when you got two teammates both capable of winning Grand Prix and therefore world championships in a championship winning car, it can never ever be a happy, friendly ship. Never. It will never be that way. So you have to build up a resilience to the other side of the garage. You've got to start protecting your own assets. And in his own way, Nelson Piquet did that very well with Nigel Mansell. He went the Honda route, persuading Honda that he was the driver that they should be giving the best engines to, and then he should take the engines away from Williams and take them to Lotus, or when Keke Rosberg was at Williams alongside Nigel, it was of course the Williams team are going to favour the English driver periodically, things like that. You've got to start thinking that way. You might call it a bit childish, I'm sure Lando would, but that's the only way you can fight it. Because if you try to be balanced with a guy you've got to beat in the same car, it'll always end badly. Always, in motor racing, in my experience. Look at Prost Senna, you think they were buddies?
I mean,
and that's the problem. And the other problem is Oscar is very, very good. I'm not saying this is a duplicitous thing. It's not, but he's very, very good at being a really cool guy, which he is, out of the car, and being a nice guy, and I'm sure Lando enjoys being with him. And he's very, very good at being an unbelievably fast, good racing driver in the car. And that's quite unusual, actually, because Prost would probably say Senna wasn't the most pleasant of people to hang out with out of the car either. But that's not the case between Lando and Oscar. Oscar is a cool guy, but he's got this other side of him, and that's the problem Lando's got, as I've been saying all winter. And my only solution to how to fight that was to get off social media, get off all the profile and brand building, and just focus 100% on how to beat this guy. Every little small thing you can do that gives you an advantage against Oscar Piastri in the McLaren team, you've got to go for it.
No, never truer than now, Peter.
It's all becoming true now, as predicted.
Gosh, it's chaos. I just say,
don't get me wrong. There will be weekends, as I said. There will be weekends when Oscar makes a mistake in qualifying and Lando's in front, and he'll have a great weekend and he'll win the Grand Prix. He's going to win plenty of races this year, but it's going to be close. I'm not saying he's not going to win the World Championship, but it's going to be much closer than Mr. Norris thought it was going to be, I'm sure.
I think what I'm getting from Lando is a level of almost intellectual snobbery. I think he should be on the phone. He should be direct dial to Nico Rosberg, who is probably the latest and greatest example of a man who was able to overcome a very material, natural talent deficit to Sir Lewis in 2016, and he's written the book as to, he says that he's cut from the same cloth as Lando and had demons as far as his mental fortitude or lack thereof, and here's how I overcame them. I had a psychiatrist. I was seeing them 2 hours a day over 48-hour period. I barely saw my family. I took the pain off my helmet to save weight. So I think that's the level of commitment that Lando might have to go to if he has aspirations of winning a championship. But he almost appears to be doing one of these, Peter. Like, see
I think possibly because of that Nico book, and possibly because of people saying as you are. I think Lando would probably say, "Well, it's all a bit complicated, isn't it?" That's why I think my medicine is much easier. Just delete all your social media, delete all your branding. Tell Zach you're not available to do any more sponsorship functions. Allow yourself 400,000 or 500,000 fines from the FIA for not doing any more interviews, and get on with it and go motor racing. Stop faffing about. That's what I would do. How much would he, if he didn't do any FIA press conferences or interviews, how much would he get fined in a year? It's a tiny percentage of his overall retainer for sure. Do it. Have a black helmet. Enough of all this changing colours for every race stuff. To have a black helmet. Try and have a dark visor the whole time. Don't talk to anybody. Just only talk to your mechanics and your race engineers, and that's it. And tell your race engineers you don't want to know anything about Oscar Piastri.
Very well said.
You want to do everything on gut feel. He wants to get right back to gut feel. Obviously, I'm exaggerating in a couple of areas, but you get my gist. Yeah. You don't need all that psychology stuff, that Nico's talking about, in my opinion.
I think there's a tax to be paid, and I question, as at the 14th of the 4th, 2025, whether Lando even understands that, let alone is willing and prepared to pay that tax to become a championship. It's good luck to him, though. He's a brilliant driver.
One of the problems, of course, in 2025 in this era is that it's bang, 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 one race after another. You don't have a lot of time to think about it. Race is over. You do all the usual things, the FIA prize giving, all that FIA interviews. And then you're on a plane, and then you're flying to Saudi Arabia, and then you got 2 days off, and you're in the gym, and then lots of people are patting you on your back. Don't worry, you'll be okay this weekend, Lando. It'll be good. Oh, look, we got this new thing on the car, and you go in the usual direction. Nothing ever changes, and you go motor racing. Oops, Oscar's 0.2 quicker again. What's going on? That's the problem. Yeah. That's why the winter was the right time to do all that stuff, not now.
100%.
Peter. And I'm saying all that because he's in an absolutely perfect position to win the championship. He's got the car of cars. He's got the team of teams, and it's not happening at the moment. I still hope it will, because, he deserves it, but not the way it's going at the moment. And I don't know how he's going to change now. I just wish he'd done it all over the winter, as I suggested he did.
Does he deserve it though, Peter? If he didn't go
away,
he
deserves it in the sense that he's got the natural talent, I think.
Agreed.
And he's a good guy. He's a good guy, and his heart's in the right place in terms of being a racing driver and what the sport is all about. I think that's why I say he deserves it. And he does drive well. When he's on it, he drives well. And he's got that beautiful, he's got that beautiful feel for letting the car settle and no brakes or throttle on a high speed corner. Just lovely to watch. but it all went away in Bahrain. In a way, I kind of sympathize with him because Bahrain is such a scratchy circuit these days, isn't it? It's all about DRS and tires going off and high-speed braking and DEG and all that rubbish. And in my video yesterday, I went on quite a lot, probably longer than I should have, about my hatred for DRS and how stupid the whole thing is. It's so artificial and wrong, and how we've got enough speed differential between the cars now without DRS, just pure toes, to not have to have it. And I think he was a victim of DRS in qualifying. You know, you could say, well, he knew about it and everybody knows how to handle DRS. Why was it only Lando? But you don't need DRS anymore. And it ruined the racing yesterday. And I think Charles Leclerc would have had a better race without DRS for a start.
Oh, go on then, let's talk about DRS, because it feels like there's a growing swathe of the F1 population fan base that say that the racing has become boring, that we need to do something. We need to make the cars lighter, more lithe and agile, lest we be doomed to have a Suzuka, a Japanese Grand Prix every single race, where the top 10, as they start, finish in exactly the same order. What do you make of that, Peter? Do we need to do something, or are we missing the essence?
Well, when you said there's a groundswell, I got excited then. And then when you went into what the groundswell was about, my heart sank, because the groundswell should be as a groundswell against DRS and how pathetic it is and how it's ruining motor racing for an apparent goal of artificial overtaking, which is all nonsense anyway. That's what I was hoping you were going to say, but of course that isn't. But that's my view is, and I think we need more Suzukas. I love Suzuka, and it's a beautiful circuit that brings out the best in racing drivers. And we had a fabulous Grand Prix. I enjoyed Suzuka much more than Bahrain because it was all about defense, attack, deft, subtle use of the brakes, the steering, and the throttle into serious corners, as distinct from Bahrain, which was all bang, crash, heavy braking at high speed, DRS here, DRS there. I mean, my heart bled for George Russell. I mean, the driving that he was having to do down the hill, through turn 9, through turn 10. And, all Lando had to do was sit behind him, knowing he had DRS, and he could just basically pass him when George's tyres went off. I mean, George, the way George was driving that Mercedes down the hill and through 9 and 10, he deserved to have a 50-meter advantage on the straight thereafter. He didn't deserve to have that advantage just closed like that. And that, to me, that's not motor racing. It's just pathetic. And if the fans want that, go and watch MotoGP or British touring cars or whatever. Formula One has not been that. One of the greatest Grand Prix of all time, 63 French Grand Prix, Jim Clark led from start to finish. Great Grand Prix, though, because he's on very old tyres and it was wet. And when it was wet, he pulled away from Graham Hill sort of 3 seconds a lap. Everybody was absolutely spellbound. That's what Grand Prix racing is all about. It's not about number of overtakes. It's not about ridiculous wheel banging. And it was even worse in Bahrain because of the way it went with all the tyre strategies. Everybody was sort of out of the right tyres to run, and they were all running what they had left, basically. And everyone was a complete mix-up. And DRS would bring them all close together going into the braking area. And then some guys would have pretty good grip, other guys no grip at all. Somebody would lock up, then somebody would have problems with the rears. It was just all over the place. That's not motor racing. It's just messy stock car racing.
Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let me push back constructively on you on that. Isn't there something to be said for F1? I don't want F1 to be sports entertainment. This isn't WWE and The Rock. I get it. But isn't there something to be said for broadening the appeal of the sport with a view to make sure noddy old Cameron here isn't catapulted back 20 years to a grammar school class in which only one other person knew about Jacques Villeneuve and Gilles Villeneuve, his dad. It was almost like a very dirty secret, this F1 thing, the language of which only 2 of us in a class of 24 spoke to. I desperately don't want that to come back. I want my wife to watch Peter, and my wife will watch Drive to Survive, but getting her to watch an actual race, Peter, you've got no chance. And I think that's a bit of a shame. Maybe DRS is a step in the right direction to bringing in more attention dollars into the sport. No?
Well, not in my opinion, no. Having never seen a single episode of Drive to Survive, I can't really comment on that. All I can talk about is the impression I get from people who do watch it, which is that it's not actually about how you drive a car through 165 mile an hour right-hander, balancing the throttle, the steering and the brakes, and the feeling you get when you've got that absolutely right. I get the feeling it's about a lot of other peripheral things to Formula One. As I've said for many, many years, and I think Drive to Survive, in that it's not about the cockpits, it's about outside the car, scratches the surface of where we should be in understanding what these guys do. And if, for example, we had had GoPros in the Red Bull office area after the Japanese Grand Prix, when Max, having done the podium and everything, comes in, starts talking to his engineers, starts talking to Christian Horner, and it's all live on television. You're hearing exactly what he's saying and exactly how great it felt to get Spoon absolutely right 3 laps out of the entire Grand Prix distance, and what he was doing there and how he was driving, and then what it was like, how he handled the pressure from the opposition, how often he looked in the mirrors, all the things that we'd love to hear Max talking about. Or another driver in the Oscar Piastri from Bahrain. That is what we need. We need that real behind the scenes understanding of what driving a Grand Prix car is all about. We don't want all the peripheral rubbish that comes from some sort of sitcom that's on Netflix. What we want is real stuff. And then you don't need to resort to puerile artificial overtaking in order to answer the question, how do we get more fans? The fans will come because they are absolutely besotted at seeing a guy like Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton or Charles Leclerc talking about, on an ongoing basis, every race, how they actually drive the car and what they're doing and what they think about the other drivers. That is, in terms of technique, that is what we should be getting. And I've been saying that for, I don't know, 10 years at least. And it's never happened, and it probably will never happen, because the owners of the sport have not enough control over the teams, and the teams won't want to do that, obviously, because they think it'll be giving away secrets. But as I've always said, if you're a serious director, you know which bits to leave out and which bits not to leave out. And that's, that's part of being a professional. That's not difficult to do at all. And I mean, right now, if you want good television, we should be filming the meeting that's going on at Ferrari to discuss what went wrong in Bahrain yesterday. Brilliant television. Absolutely brilliant television. That's how you get new young viewers to the sport. It's not by, oh, we'll have 5 DRS zones instead of 3. That's not going to do anything. What is DRS? It's just a way of actually neutralizing the talent of very good racing drivers. And that's where the sport has completely gone off the rails. And it all began with surveys which asked the fans, do you want to have more overtaking? As I've always said, they're all going to say, oh yeah, we want more overtaking. Aren't they? Of course they are. But they never say at the expense of what? And that's the problem. And and if we had much more access to the teams, to the mechanics, I've always said, there's a whole world out there, whether it be the mechanics, the guys that raise the sponsorship, the guys that do the logistics, the hospitality. There's so many parts of a Formula One team, and yet it's all kept under wraps. None of that is exposed. And it's to Formula One's loss, because it's all the content is there and we're not bringing it out. It's a great shame.
It sounds like then, Peter, we want an all or nothing style documentary, that all or nothing do something very different to Drive to Survive, in that it's not all quick TikTok style editing. It's longer pieces, but again, you'll get in the dressing room or the paddock, you'll get to see the behind the scenes, a Christian Horner shouting at a Max Verstappen, or Max telling Pierre Vacher what's going on with my car in the debrief it won't turn. So maybe, I think it sounds like you're not against documentary style Netflix, but just not necessarily Drive to Survive's unique brand of truth. Saying,
well, call it Drive to Survive and put it on Netflix, but it needs to be live and it needs to be real and it needs to be proper stuff to do with what Formula One is all about, not about rubbish. That's the point. With no swearing, please. And that's how it should be. But again, I don't know all or nothing. But what I do know is the doc that Amazon Prime did on the Australian cricket team, and I thought that was pretty good.
That's the same.
That wouldn't be. That's not far away what we should be doing in Formula One, in my opinion. But I've said, it should be GoPros in the road cars when they're driving to the track in the morning and going home at night, and maybe even stuff in hotel lobby, in the coffee shop, whatever. All that stuff should be filmed. All the content's there. And if it's not the drivers, start doing the engineers, start doing the guys back at base, start doing everybody. It's a huge, how many people in a Grand Prix team? We often hear, 1,000 people, whatever. That's what we should be seeing. All that content out there is just being wasted. That's the point. I mean, a football team is what, I don't know, it's just the players really, isn't it? But a Grand Prix team is 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Massive amount of potential content there. They never use it. Never.
There are,
And the stuff the teams put out, being media hubs of their own right, is all, vanilla rubbish that doesn't say anything. Well, it says what they want to say and that's it and nothing else. It's not real stuff.
just a tad. Go on then, Mr.
Just
Windsor.
the way Drive to Survive, I imagine, from what I gather, is not real stuff either.
No.
Otherwise, guys like Max and Charles would like it probably if it was real.
Not all the time. Telling cheeky porkies.
Well, as you say, if you got
George
Russell winning the Belgian Grand Prix last year, then obviously it's not real true to life.
I get why they did it, Peter. I understand when the producers say they just needed to tell a story.
It's just lying.
So
how can that be acceptable?
So in defence of them, asking of the audience that they suspend their disbelief, the story that they were seeking to tell in the George episode was one of George coming to power, becoming his final best self, and being able to fill the not insubstantial shoes of Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, and in showing him winning for all of 5-10 minutes before getting disqualified, that they managed to tell that storyline, even if it wasn't.
But that's absurdly stupid, because the one thing I'd want to know about George Russell was how he reacted when he heard that his car had been disqualified. That's the one thing you want to know, what his reaction was. Nothing else is important from that weekend. We never got to see that because it was all behind closed doors. They had access. Why didn't they show it? That's terrible, that they didn't do that.
Agreed, Peter. And maybe that's why Drive to Survive ultimately isn't for us, because we're always going to be watching F1, whether it's boring or whether it's fantastic racing, whether there's a DRS or not. Like, we'll still be there, but I think they're pitching it as their target demographic. They're pitching it to the guys and girls like my wife who have never ever watched it.
Well, that's the mistake. You should never ever pitch anything to anyone. Just do what is correct. Don't do something because you want to pitch it to a target group. Do you think Ernest Hemingway, when he was sitting down writing his novels, thought, which target group am I going to write The Old Man in the Sea for? Come on, he just wrote The Old Man in the Sea because he wanted to write Old Man in the Sea. It was inside him. Do it because it's correct. That's what creativity is all about. It's not about target audiences or hashtags or the next generation. It's all about doing what is correct. And if you're in a privileged position to be creative and to have some sort of platform, some sort of voice, it behoves you to respect those boundaries and to be creative. Not be afraid to say what has to be said. I cannot in a million years accept any argument along the lines of, it's better not to tell the public that George was disqualified in the Belgian Grand Prix. I mean, how can that be acceptable?
It's a good shout, Peter. I'll defer to your infinite wisdom on that.
It's not my wisdom. I'm just trying to speak logically. I would have felt, the age I am now, 73, I would feel the same at 21. Nothing has changed, When I was a writer, I am still a writer, but when you sit down and write, I've never written for a target audience. I've written what I wanted to write and what I felt was the situation. And nothing's ever changed. I don't see why, just because we've got all this access to what people supposedly like or don't like. Bear in mind, a lot of that so-called data and information is spurious anyway, because it's based on the wrong questions being asked or very quick grabs at what these people seem to be watching. It's all meaningless. If you explain something correctly, people should understand it.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, Mr. Windsor. Speaking of, though, speaking about saying things that need to be said, Max Verstappen cut a very cold, almost emotionally devoid figure in the post-race scrum and post-race press conferences. The rumour, word on the F1 mill, per Ted Kravitz, is that there was a heated meeting. Raymond Vermeulen, manager of Max Verstappen, went at Helmut Marko post-race and had some very choice words to say. So too, the Dutch media and press, courtesy of the Telegraph, are saying that there was an emergency meeting after the Grand Prix with Max, Christian, Helmut, Pierre Vacher, all related parties, discussing what they're going to do with the summer break looming large and the potential for Maximilian Verstappen pushing the button on a performance clause that would allow him in real time to null and void his contract. What do you make about that rumour, Peter? And do you think Max Verstappen, do you think the possibility that Max leaves for an Aston Martin or Mercedes is increasing, as I do, by not by the second, but by the millisecond now?
Well, the fact that they had a meeting after the race, no surprise whatsoever. They all have meetings after every race. So, and I can't imagine the meeting was a happy one because it was a terrible race and Max would have felt he gave it 100% and the car was rubbish. So how could it have been a good meeting? But that's motor racing, happens all the time. Last weekend, they won the Japanese Grand Prix. So let's not get too carried away by it all. As I've said all along, from Max's point of view, it is not logic. It's illogical to even think about switching teams until he knows how the 26 Red Bull Ford is going to go. And that means racing for them in 26. And if that car is not quick, and if there's another car out there that's a lot quicker, be it Mercedes, Ferrari, whatever, Aston Martin, then yeah, I'm sure he'll go to one of those teams. But I can't imagine why he would want to think that the 26 Red Bull Ford is going to be a bad car before he's even seen it. And he's never seen any of the other cars either. And it's a completely new regulation. So why would he leave? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I don't think anything's changed other than that they had a terrible race. And I think you've got to draw, there are a couple of things about that race rather than just sort of generically doing a sort of Daily Telegraph 30,000 foot view of, oh, he might leave. I mean, the reality is one, two fouled up pit stops. Would they have happened if Jonathan Wheatley was still there? That's a big question. And I think that question, for sure, Red Bull would have to say no. But maybe, that's unfair to what actually happened. But it looks to me like things have gone downhill since Jonathan left. A, and B, the absence of Adrian Newey now, is it starting to have an effect? Is there something that Adrian would have done on that car Friday night that would have given Max a half reasonable race car by Sunday that didn't happen on this occasion? It's the first time really since Adrian left that Red Bull have had a weekend where the car didn't get any better from Friday through to Sunday night. And I'd say that's a big worry. And obviously they don't understand what this issue is. And when Max talks, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he talks a lot on the radio about the brakes. I can't stop the car, I've got no brakes. And yet he often talks about how he's got no front end, it doesn't turn in, and he's got no grip, and very difficult to manage the tyres. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. Because what we should remember is that Max uses the brakes very differently from virtually every driver on the grid. He's using the brakes into the corner in a way that Lando Norris never uses the brakes, for example, or Oscar Piastri now into a corner. And so the brakes are part of the way Max gets into corners. It's how he uses the front of the car. And if he doesn't have the feel in the brake pedal pressure that he needs in order to do that lovely balancing act that he has when he's gone in early to a corner and he's just going down to what he knows is the right rotation point, then he's completely lost. He's just a normal racing driver then. He's a Yuki Tsunoda almost. And he's got nothing else he can impart. And that must be a horrendous feeling for Max when that happens. And that's how he had basically drove Bahrain. And so the big question is, why is that happening? Is it a tyre thing? Is it a tyre warming thing? Is it a roll center front suspension thing? Is it part of the brake system somehow? I mean, obviously they changed a lot of things on the brakes, didn't they, on Saturday night? No difference whatsoever. And onto the grid, he said, the car's really, really pointy. And he didn't have much grip at the front anyway, so that was that. And so we'll see. I mean, reading the stuff after the race, they're saying, there'll be an upgrade, I think, for this next race. Is that
Imola.
Right? It's difficult. Oh, Imola, is it? Okay. So, yeah, it'll be more of the same in Saudi. Probably less so because Saudi Arabia is more about, those fast S's. He should be half reasonable through there. And yeah, high-speed braking. It's not quite the same as braking into a corner like, say, turn 4 or turn 10 in Bahrain, or even turn 11, 12, 13, 14, but 14 or 15. But don't have those corners in Saudi Arabia, so he'll probably be slightly better off there. Top speed's not too bad, I think. But it's a worry. It's a big worry. They decided not to replace Adrian with a star replacement engineer, and they're doing it all in-house. And those guys must be under a massive amount of pressure now to work out what's going on. I mean, for Max's manager to get involved, I don't know, what's that all about? Why Max is quite capable of saying to them, the car's rubbish, get it sorted. Why does he need the manager to say anything, or manager to Helmut Marko? How's that going to improve anything? I don't get that at all. Raymond's a great guy, but That doesn't make sense to me. I'm sure that happened, but that's been reported out of context, I would suggest.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Raymond would have done that.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I suppose to your question, Peter, they've got to kind of go to bat for their guy, Max. Again,
but you don't need a manager to do that. I mean,
Max
doesn't need someone to bat for him when he's saying the car's got no grip or balance or brakes, does he? Why does he need? What is the manager going to be able to say to him? Say to anybody?
Agree. Let me ask
Put
you
another way: if you're the head of director of engineering at Red Bull and Max's manager is telling you that the car hasn't got enough grip, what are you going to say to him?
Yeah, it's a good shout.
Yeah, that's ludicrous. But yeah, I like all good. I mean, Max doesn't even need to exercise anything in the contract. If Max Verstappen wants to go, if Ferrari, no, Florence Stroll says, okay, I'm gonna sack my son. He's going back to Canada and he's going to go rallying or whatever. I want you in that car, number one driver, with Adrian Newey in 26. I think Max would probably do that, wouldn't he? He'd probably say yes. Regardless of the contract situation, he'd just do it on the basis that, well, they can sue me, whatever. I'm just going to go.
Yeah, 1,000%.
And I think that's what would happen. But as I say, I don't think he will do that because he needs to know what the Red Bull is going to be like in 26. Does he not?
Well, if I put on my accounting cap for a second, there's a couple of ways to value a business, Peter, if we use the analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So one is at present value. So asset value, what do they own and how much is it worth? And one is if you look at forecasted earnings in the future. Now, if Max levies the asset value, if he looks at what Red Bull can provide him as at April 2025, it's like not a lot. If you look at the forward focus, then potentially something in 2026. But I don't think Vacher and Co are going to fix the car anytime soon. So I think when he had the car, when he had like the RB20 and the RB19, a dominant machine, then you give Max Verstappen a decision to make. Do I stay or do I go? But because the car's so bad now, it's almost like, well, I may as well roll the dice. It's almost like Max absorbs more risk in staying than he would do leaving, is how I think of it, Peter.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. To me, Max is going to win more Grand Prix this year. It'll have to be exceptional circumstances like the weather or a great circuit or the opposition getting it wrong, but he will win more races. And then see what happens in 26. It's nothing to do with money, any of this. It's all about being in a competitive car and needing to be in the right car. And there's no guarantee the Aston Martin Honda is going to be a great car in 26. It might be, but don't see a lot of Adrian's magic on this car, do we, at the moment? I know he's saying, oh, it's nothing to do with me, you guys get on and run it. But as I said at the start of the year, if Fernando is going reasonably well now, you can be sure that a lot of people would be saying, oh, wow, Adrian Newey,
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. If I was Max, I'd stay quiet. I wouldn't stay quiet. I'd be giving them a hard time, as he is. But equally, I would be focusing on being at Red Bull, doing what they do well, and learning as much as I could about next year's power plant and the car. And it's a completely different car next year. Sure. I mean, you can't in any way say because this year's car's terrible, then next year's car's going to be, the 26 car's going to be terrible, any more than you can say that Sauber are going to be slow next year either. They might be really quick.
True. It's a good point. I think what concerns me, if I go back to Max very quickly, just to put a full stop on this, Max historically has always been very vocal over the radio. Remember Hungary last year when he was giving the beans to his racing engineer saying, listen, I'm on -5 brake bias and the car still won't fudging turn. All of a sudden, Max has this cool, calm demeanour to Peter. And whether maybe that just comes with maturity, 27 years old. And
I think it does a little bit, but I think it also comes from knowing there's not much they can do about it, doesn't it?
Agreed.
And there was that lovely thing when he said something like, I can't stop the car, I've got no grip, no balance. And they just said, understood.
So what are we going to do?
That must be a bit irritating after a while, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not telling you because I want you to understand it. I'm telling you because I want you to do something about it, guys.
Fix your fudging car, as Christian Horner very famously said to Toto Wolff on porpoising in Drive to Survive. Peter, as we round third base, let me ask you about the chaos that's going on at Ferrari. It seems like outcomes in Lewis, I want to say fifth, and then Charles Leclerc finishing higher than Lewis, almost flattered to deceive that they're trying to fix the car and they've got a gazillion upgrades. What do you make of what's going on at Scuderia
Well, I'm
Ferrari?
glad you asked that, Cameron, because I've actually got to make a confession, and that is that in the video last night, in the rush of doing everything, I just assumed that Ferrari started on mediums because they they were forced into that situation given the tire sets they had left, and that was the best option they had based on where they were with tires. And I took the trouble this morning, I should have done it yesterday, to look at what sets were available going into the race. And unbelievably, only Ferrari had the same number of sets of right tires as McLaren. They could have run the McLaren strategy absolutely perfectly throughout the race. And yet they started on medium. I can't understand. I mean, stepping back a bit, the whole thing about Freddie Vasseur is he's a racer. He's a Jonathan Wheatley on steroids. He's a guy that can feel racing in the pit lane, and that is all about strategy, tire compound selection, managing the drivers, managing the engineers, getting basic problems solved before they actually happen. That's what Freddie Vasseur does. That's who he is. I cannot imagine how they managed to get it so wrong on tire strategy. And I was reading, I thought, what is going on here? They actually could have started on softs like everybody else and gone to mediums like everybody else. Instead of which they did everything wrong. And then I was reading, I wondered if there's an explanation here. So I was reading the Ferrari press release this morning, and it basically starts off saying, Charles paid the penalty for starting on medium tires in the early laps of the race. Well, why did he start on medium tires? I mean, I've been still looking at the numbers here, trying to think what they were doing, and I can only imagine. I mean, I'm assuming the teams they know what the other allocations are with the other teams before the race. They don't know what they're going to run, do they? They know how many sets of tires. Ferrari know how many sets of tires Mercedes have got left because that information is given out to the press. So I guess the teams know it, and they would have looked at that and thought, well, McLaren had got 2 sets of new mediums, which was the key tire in the race. We've got 2 sets of new mediums, but Red Bull and Mercedes have only got 1 set. So they probably thought, we're racing Mercedes, so we'll do something there. Because Mercedes have only got 1 set, they're probably going to start on softs because they want to keep that medium for the middle stint. So we'll do something different. We'll start on mediums. That's the only thing I can think of. I can't think of anything else. Nothing else would explain it, because why, if you've got 2 sets of new mediums going into the race, would you run the strategy they did? Why wouldn't you just start on soft and then go soft, medium, medium? And lo and behold, you look at the possible race strategies that Pirelli put out, and the number 1 strategy to win that Grand Prix is soft, medium, medium. Now, what did Ferrari do? Ferrari did medium, medium, hard. Oops, that's not even in any of the Pirelli strategies.
Yeah.
What was that all about? I mean, I just don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, I can see why George was forced to run the softs because they were out of mediums, but why would Ferrari do that? And so that's the first thing. You got to say, just extraordinary, really. They wanted to be different, I guess. And they probably thought there's no way Charles is going to be able to beat Oscar in the early laps. So we won't worry about the drag race. We won't worry about being on the medium tire. And so we'll put him on the medium against the soft, and then he can just settle down into P2 or whatever. And sure enough, half the guys on soft tires blow past him as well. So that wasn't exactly good, was it?
No.
And then we saw how good George was on the softs at the end of the race.
Yeah.
So, I said good. I mean, the way George handled it, and Charles could have done that.
Yeah, I think Charles definitely.
And anyway, at the restart, why don't you split the strategies if you're not sure, between Charles and Lewis? Probably because they're frightened of one of the drivers not coming out well and the fur that's going to fly, either from Lewis or Charles, if the other guy gets an advantage. So they're locked in now because they've got this big megastar lineup of trying to put them on the same strategy all the time to avoid all the dramas. And that's a big mistake as well.
1,000%, Peter. Has a Grand Prix ever been won because of weaponizing fear? Sometimes you've got to he who dares wins, right? Sometimes you've got to play your cards. Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder what went through Charles' mind when all the covers came off the tyres on the grid and he saw he was the only guy on mediums. I wonder how he felt. Only quick guy,
Yeah, it's not a. I don't
That's
know.
what we need to see on that television show I was just talking about.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
the reason why the post-mortem. I agree with you. Oh,
that sort of thing. But having said all that, Ferrari incredibly positive in their press release, unbelievably pleased. The car making big steps forward. Lewis brilliant from midfield. Charles fighting fourth, absolutely fabulous. Great race.
I was just
George Russell P2 in a Mercedes, Charles Leclerc P4 in a Ferrari on a circuit like Bahrain. Sorry, guys, there's something wrong there.
a
That shouldn't have
1,000%.
happened.
That was
The
going to be
way
my.
Charles drove absolutely brilliantly, and yeah, he should have got more than fourth place out of that.
I was just about to ask you as a follow-up question, Peter. Are you buying what the Ferrari press release is selling you? Is that sounds a lot like propaganda?
I'm not buying any of it. No, I mean, well, how can you buy it when it said, Charles paid the price of running mediums in the early laps? Because the immediate question is, why? Why was he on the mediums?
Peter, go on then. Let's talk more broadly.
Oh yeah, sorry. They could run a longer
Oh my
stint.
gosh. Yeah. Peter, let's talk more broadly about Scuderia Ferrari's problems. I don't want to get into the Lewis Hamilton stuff because I think that plot line is going to run and run. But Luca de Montezemolo was there in person, wasn't he? And he was quoted as saying something to the effect of Ferrari lack leadership in the broadest terms. When you have a Ferrari legend like Luca de Montezemolo,
No, don't worry about that. It's just Luca Montezemolo, because that's how he was always known when he was in racing. And I did an interview with him in about 1998, 2000. And in the interview, I said, Luca, why is everybody calling you Luca di Montezemolo now? What's that all about? And he said, no, I don't know. It's rubbish. It's Luca Montezemolo, he said to me.
Let's go.
On tape. So I've got it there.
It's official. Breaking news.
Yeah.
Peter. But I only say that to say this. If Luca is saying such things, again, well-respected Ferrari figure, then isn't this a matter of when, not if, when people will be calling for the head of team principal Frederick Vasseur?
I'm not sure that's what he was saying, was he? I didn't hear what he said, but from what you've just said, it seemed as if he's saying that there's some quite faceless Fiat people above him, sort of Philip Morris type executives running the company. And Freddie's okay, but he needs to have somebody like me, Luca, above him. And I think he's right. I think if Luca was president of Ferrari or whatever, or chairman, whatever they want to make him, and then you had Freddie Vasseur below him, I think that'd be a really good team. But, the way it is at the moment, I imagine it's a nightmare for Fred to try to explain what Formula One's all about to these guys, isn't it, or not?
No, he's ill. I don't know, Peter.
And that's probably part of the problem. But then, again, maybe I'm overvaluing Freddie, but I can't imagine Fred Vasseur wouldn't have gone there unless he knew that he could deal with the people above him and get through all that corporate rubbish and make sure it happened. That's why Adrian knew he wouldn't go there unless he knew he could do it the way he wanted. And so Fred shouldn't have gone there unless he knew that he could do whatever he wanted, however he wanted to do it. That's what Fred Vasseur is. He's a racer.
Interesting times at Scuderia. Who would want to be a Scuderia Ferrari driver, Peter, and with a view to try and solve for all of the ills of that team operationally?
Well, it's a good point you make there, because there I am banging on about Freddie and the tyre choice. But ultimately, you wonder how Lewis and Charles allowed Ferrari to go down that route of starting on the mediums as well. And that's another point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, I think it's almost second guessing one another, because Ferrari have got these two megastars, and it's very difficult now to let one of them go one way and one the other. And maybe to keep the peace, one wants to start on hard, one soft, one medium. So we'll toss a coin. Oh, okay, both mediums. I don't know what it was,
Peter. But it feels and looks like that, Peter. You say
well, it does. It's just like, how could they defy all the Pirelli predictions, and indeed what McLaren, everybody else is feeling, which is that the medium tire is really good. We'll start the race on the used softs and we'll just capitalize on the medium. And how could Ferrari not know that or feel that? I mean, did they have a terrible full tank run on the medium or something? I don't think they did.
No. I think they're just Ferrari, Peter, ultimately. Full stop, new paragraph. And sometimes they have plan A to Z, all of which are bad plans in the broader context of the race, which is...
Yeah, it's again, Saudi Arabia is a different circuit again. it's DRS on steroids again, isn't it? So they'll be all right there probably, and we'll all be talking about something else, and everything will be happy again.
Go on then, Mr. Windsor. As we round third base, you talk about Saudi Arabia. To save a dying puppy, you've got to put all your money on one driver to win that race. Who have you got?
Oh, don't ask me questions like this, Cameron, because for me, I don't know, it's such a stupid circuit that, well, am I allowed to say that? Yeah, I think I am. It's just a sort of, it's just a TV overtake circuit, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know, George Russell probably.
Oof. Blimey, that's not a bad pick. He feels like he's doing the old Alan Prost thing at the moment, just quietly going about his business in a very stealthy...
Well, not that quiet. I mean, he's driving a lot more aggressively than Alan Prost ever drove, I'll tell you that. Maybe in terms of the radar of public persona, but in terms of the way he's going through